Let's get you on the ground in Minneapolis with MS Now's Nnamdi Egwuonwu, our senior White House reporter Von Hilliard standing by in Washington, and also joining us, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark and former ICE Assistant Chief Counsel Veronica Cardenas. Von, what more are we learning about President Trump potentially deploying U.S. troops to yet another American city, yet again in defiance of local leaders?
Right. And actually, in just the last few minutes, as we were coming on air, our White House colleague, Laura Barron-Lopez, is now reporting that the Army's 11th Airborne Division was over the weekend called to be ready to go into active duty in the streets of Minnesota. This is an airborne division that is based in Alaska and specializes in cold weather conditions. Again, you're looking up to potentially 1,500 active servicemen and women who could be potentially deployed into the streets of Minneapolis. Now, this is coming at the same time that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has already called up National Guard members in Minnesota, not to be deployed at this point in time, but to potentially come and support local law enforcement as he and other local officials continue to urge peace in the streets here. But this is all coming to a head as the extent to just how long the Trump administration intends to have federal agents on the ground is still not clear.
Nnamdi, what was the scene overnight and this weekend? Have things escalated?
Well, you know, Anna, there has been a huge focus from local leaders here on any protest or demonstration remaining peaceful. Everyone I speak to, they're aware of the fact that any sort of escalation could be used as a pretext for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act. So the big concern on Saturday, for instance, was there was a large demonstration being organized by a self-described Islamophobe right-wing influencer that aimed to gather a whole bunch of people on City Hall as sort of a protest against what he called a crusade against Little Somalia. That had local leaders on edge, that if there was a large counter-protest being formed in response to that, you could see some sort of clash. But ultimately, that never really materialized just because not many people came to support this anti-Islamic crusade, and he was vastly outnumbered by counter-protesters. So ultimately, things there remaining calm. But that night at the Whipple Federal Building, where I am, which has served as the de facto headquarters for ICE, there was once again one of those volatile clashes between federal agents and protesters who once again had to use crowd control measures like tear gas and rubber bullets to keep a small but angry group of protesters in line. And now that has resulted in some changes that I do want to point out behind me. For instance, you can see some of these new gates right here that have been installed. They've essentially, with the help of the Hennepin County Sheriff, created a new protest area. They're now trying to prevent protesters from going in the middle of the road, interacting with federal agents directly by prevent them from trying to enter this facility by limiting them to this sidewalk. And they've put in fences to ensure that happens. You're also, for the first time, seeing a consistent presence of Hennepin County Sheriff officers here. One told me today that the current plan, at least for now, is for them to be on a sort of 24-hour duty. All of that comes, as Secretary Noem, I'll point out, did ask Mayor Frey to implement protest zones at areas like the Whipple Building. While the mayor said that he doesn't want to see limits on free speech, it seems the county sheriff was at least willing to comply to a degree there. All of this, of course, comes amid this threat, like you mentioned, from the president that he could possibly invoke the Insurrection Act. And again, the readying of those Army personnel. Mayor Frey, in an interview yesterday, called that intimidation. I want to play you what he had to say.
Here's the thing. We're not going to be intimidated. If the goal here is safety, we've got many mechanisms to achieve safety. And the best way to get safety is not to have an influx of even more agents. I'm so proud to be the mayor of this awesome city with these extraordinary people. They're peacefully protesting. They're standing up for one another. I never thought in a million years that we would be invaded by our own federal government.
And again, it's worth noting that organizers we speak to are aware of the stakes. They're aware of the political dynamic they're operating in. They're still upset. They are still planning programming throughout this week. But again, the priority is that all of the demonstrations they organize remain peaceful.
Nnamdi Egwuonwu, thank you for your reporting. I know it's so cold there. Please go get warm. General, the Pentagon would reportedly rotate these troops if these active duty troops were to be sent to Minneapolis out of Alaska. We've confirmed at least 2 battalions have been readied. We've seen other reporting from other outlets, specifically that those troops are ready for Minnesota, all at a time when the president claims that he's trying to bolster America's military footprint in the Arctic. So does this plan make sense to you?
Well, I think it has to be looked at from both the national security side and also the domestic politics side. And so I can understand why the president is doing this. He is trying to put pressure on the people in Minnesota. But, you know, Anna, what's really different about this is, first of all, these troops in Alaska, although they may be capable of doing crowd control and civil disturbance duties, they wouldn't be as well trained as the National Guard in this, I'm sure, because they're up there as active duty. They're working attacks, defense, delay, the normal military maneuvers, platoon, company, battalion. Suddenly they get called and told, you're going to go to Minnesota and do civil disturbance and crowd control and so forth. It'll be a real effort for them. But this is what the president wants. The difference is that in the 1960s and 70s, when we had these disturbances, when the Army learned how to do crowd control, it was about de-escalation. It was not about something that was actually driven by a federal need to enforce, except for the case in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. And there we did have the National Guard called out by the governor to prevent desegregation of Central High School. And President Eisenhower then federalized the National Guard, brought in the 101st Airborne, and we every day we escorted the Little Rock group of 10 young people into Central High School. That's the last time I can think of anything similar to this that was actually done to enforce law. And it's been a long time, and that was clearly required by law. This is something a little bit different that's going on in American cities today.
Yeah, that context, I think, is so important, and that history is important. Veronica, the troop deployment would be triggered, right, if the president invoked the Insurrection Act. So that's what we're talking about. He's floated to do that. It was last invoked more than 30 years ago in response to the Rodney King riots in 1992. California's governor welcomed that move at the time. We know in that situation, dozens of people had died. There was widespread destruction because of the riots. Is the Minnesota situation anything like that? How do you see this potential move?
I see this potential move as another betrayal to the American public. We are talking about immigration laws and enforcement of immigration laws. That has been constantly a moving target under this administration in the way that they're changing the laws. The enforcement of immigration, they're not equipped to go out and just arrest everyone who is peacefully protesting, who's observing, and we're seeing the consequences of that, of an agency that is allowed to arrest without warrant. Congress has given them so many authorities that strip courts of even reviewing this. We see the district courts really grappling with this issue. The court in Illinois, who had a stay against the excessive force of immigration, that went up to the Seventh Circuit. It came back down, and the district court judge still hasn't issued a dismissal on that case because of the Renee Good murder. And so we're seeing district courts grappling with this. And immigration was meant for targeted enforcement, not a massive sweep to just ask anyone who is present on the streets about whether or not they have status to be in the United States.
I do want to mention that a federal judge on Friday did bar federal agents in Minneapolis from arresting peaceful protesters or trying to stop drivers who aren't obstructing their immigration actions. Meantime, coming back to the potential of further escalation when you talk about federal forces on the ground, Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz has also readied the state's National Guard, and officials this weekend said the Guard is, quote, ready to help support public safety, including protection of life, preservation of property, and supporting the rights of all who assemble peacefully. General, that last point, protecting protesters, basically, could this create a scenario where the National Guard is at cross purposes with the federal agents and the troops sent in by the Pentagon? How would that even play out?
It could create a situation where it might appear that there's a conflict between the ICE agents and the National Guard. But the National Guard would be focused on holding back and forming a protective shield around the protesters. So it might not be what it looks like. Now, if you put the active duty forces in there, then you're going to probably federalize the local National Guard so there's unity of command. So they would be under the command of the active duty commander who's there. So there wouldn't be a conflict between uniformed forces.
Veronica, some Democrats argue ICE has become a rogue agency under President Trump and that it needs to be dissolved or drastically overhauled. ICE has only been around for about 23 years. And, for much of that time, illegal immigration has increased. Immigration processing has only become more backlogged. Has ICE failed? And what would immigration enforcement without ICE look like?
I think ICE as an agency has failed. I think DHS as a department has failed. And the reason that it has failed is because Congress just gave it too much authority. Anytime there's issues of national security, border security, the government has wide latitude in how to enforce those laws. But what we're seeing now is a shift from border enforcement. Most of the arrests that are happening now are happening in the interior. We're seeing a departure from going after the worst of the worst. The statistics show that most of the people that are detained, about 80%, do not have criminal records. And we're also seeing a shift, not just targeting non-citizens, people without documentation. They're actually targeting the documented, people who are going through the process legally in the hopes that they can rush deportation before someone can get legal status. They're also going after U.S. citizens and peaceful protesters. So we're seeing a lot of departures here. The agency, the department does need to be gutted. Congress needs to have broader restrictions on what ICE can do and how courts can review their actions.